cramming little girls' heads full of indoctrination in the name of politics, using student newspapers to promote hatred against white boys, and Elizabeth Johnson's new book next on The Dr. Duke Show. Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Duke, and this is The Dr. Duke Show. Every week we cover those important stories impacting K-12 classrooms and college campuses across this great nation. Greetings to all of our listeners, and if you haven't done so, please subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and never ever miss an episode. As always, I am joined by Katie Petrick, who is my co-pilot on the show today, and we kick things off with the first story, which is really kind of a surprising one. Are you ready for the Radical Cram School? This is a YouTube show that also appears on Facebook. It's by kind of not funny comedian Christina Wong. Christina Wong's Cram School. It's all about teaching young girls between the ages of 7 and 11 radical politics. Take a look at this clip.
Hello, my young comrades.
Hi.
I'm going to show a picture. This is my way of figuring out if you've been tainted by the patriarchy.
Patriarchy? What? Who's that?
Who do you think it is?
This looks creepy.
It looks creepy. Why?
There's just like this thing about white people that just makes me be like, I'm like, they're like right there in a pool, and I'm just like walking into the pool, and they just give me the death stare, and then I'm just like.
So if this guy was in the pool, you would moonwalk out.
So again, what Christina Wong is trying to do, and I realized that looked like parody. That looked like a really bad Saturday Night Live sketch, didn't it? I expected Turd Ferguson to walk through at some point. But notice what you've got. You've got young girls in resistance berets, right? And very Girl Scouty. And yet here's what they're being taught. Teaching Asian girls media literacy, intersectionality, and solidarity.
Yeah, and she's describing this series on her blog as Sesame Street for the resistance. So she's actually wanting this to be an education, quote unquote, but it's an indoctrination to these girls. And you said it, they're ages 7 to 11, and 8 of them identify as girls, and then they actually, in one of the episodes, one identifies as gender fluid. Pretty much after Wong's like, so who's gender non-conforming?
Gender non-binary.
All right, what does this mean?
You're gender fluid.
You're gender fluid, wow. What does gender fluid mean?
Like you can be any gender you want to be. You're not a boy, or like you're not just a boy, you're not just a girl.
Yeah. Does anybody know anyone who's gender non-binary? Elle?
I am gender fluid.
You're gender fluid.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful thing. Thank you for sharing that. So when people talk about genders only being 2 things, you go, no, there's actually gender non-binary. It's a thing.
It's a thing.
She basically said, because this is coming out as a whole nother season. It was announced in January. Season 2 is going to be on its way. And someone asked her about this indoctrination, and she fully admits it and embraces it.
Yeah, we are. And we've been greenlit. Season 2 is coming.
So what she's doing is she's getting people to donate money to her so she can indoctrinate even more children.
Yeah, and she's convinced that Donald Trump is the reason that inspired her for this. Donald Trump, of course, is the great misogynist in chief who is going to, by his very presence, sort of magically encrypt anti-female attitudes in these young 6 and 7 and 8 and 10-year-old girls. In fact, there's an actual clip about Donald Trump we want to show you.
It's Donald Duck.
What do we know about him? What do we know about him?
He's bad.
Unfortunately, the president.
I want to fire him. I want to build a wall.
How do we feel about this wall?
It is blocking opportunity for people that don't live in America to come here for a better opportunity.
I remember studying the 1930s when you had the fascists and then you had the communists. And they were both doing the exact same thing. They were both making enemies of the other. They were both using terms like comrade or Hitlerjugend, right, to indoctrinate children at very young ages to hate the other. And that's what you've got going on here. And I go back to what I said before. How is this radically different from what the Palestinians were doing a few years ago? Remember when the Palestinians were putting on a kids show and they had a cartoon, was it a bumblebee maybe, a cartoon mascot who was inculcating little kids this age to hate Jews? The world condemned it. There is no condemnation of this from the progressives in the world today.
Well, let's move on to New Jersey, where that state has become the second state in the union, after obviously California, to require LGBTQ history. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy signed a bill into law on February 4th, and it's requiring schools to now teach the LGBTQ history in their classrooms starting with the 2020-2021 school year.
Yeah, and my big problem with this is what's happening to history education. In order to do this, you've got to go back and project transgenderism down through history. History is thousands of years old. The history we should be exposing to our kids in high school and middle school is broad and deep. But now you're going to have to cut into that history to project backwards. We don't have a lot of people who identified as transgender from 50 years ago or 100 years ago or 300 years ago. There are no colonial patriots. There are no medieval swordsmen. There are no Renaissance poets who identify as transgender. As happened in California, the first state in the Union to do this, they started gaying people in history, right? Leonardo da Vinci was a homosexual. Abe Lincoln may have been homosexual because he shared a bed with a man at one point in an inn. Everybody did that back then. And so you go quietly back through history. One of our presidents was unmarried. So he was unmarried because he was probably gay, right? And so now you're going to do that to history. Our kids are getting so little accurate history now. Now you got gay history that has to be taught. You've got transsexual history, transgender history that's got to be taught. The history of unions now is mandated to be taught in places like California. So in other words, the only history in about 10 years you'll be allowed to teach is progressive social justice history.
And okay, I love history. What I've never understood about this is the fact that, like, when I learned my history, I didn't learn sexual preferences at all.
Did you spend one moment learning about George Washington's heterosexuality in school?
I did not.
Was the Constitution mediated by heterosexism? No, right? It doesn't happen that way. And yet now we've got a foreground. So the only sexualities we are going to foreground for our kids are non-traditional ones.
Absolutely. The bill does also require people with disabilities to be included in the curriculum, and the bill doesn't apply to private schools. So that's something to know.
Well, the good news is it doesn't apply to private schools, but as we've seen with this garbage a long time ago, many private schools, in order to keep up with their social justice peers, are going to do it. Believe it or not, many Christian and many Catholic diocese schools will start engaging in this garbage as well. We already know the Catholic colleges and the Christian colleges are conforming to this. And, you know, in terms of all of this is all about inclusion, right? Everything has to be included, and in order to do that, you have to exclude what we used to call real learning. Critical thinking has to be excluded to make way for these new alternative 154 different genders. It requires a suspension of critical thinking to believe that. So you suspend critical thinking, you suspend traditional history. We don't teach the history now of heterosexuality because to do so would be considered criminal, right? It would be discriminatory. To suggest to these kids, right, as you're teaching transgender history, that the vast majority of people who've ever lived have not been transgender. In fact, that transgenderism is so statistically insignificant as to barely warrant a footnote. Now it becomes the focus of the curriculum, and you can exactly see the kind of mind-altering, indoctrinating education. This is something right out of cram school.
Yes, it is. Well, in New Jersey itself, as an entire state, they have this huge agenda that they've been pushing towards. So they're modeling themselves off of California. Mm-hmm. So New Jersey's on the other side of the country, and yet this little state has pretty much maybe the most progressive of all the policies, because now they have it where schools that have kids who identify as some other gender, they can change their gender, and they do not have to tell their parents. The parents will not be notified. So see what New Jersey's doing, and then it's going to happen in all the other states.
Yeah, and notice this. The schools have the authority to enable your kids to do or say or be anything they want. You don't have the same authority as a mom or dad. You don't have to be notified anymore. And this is really disturbing because you're basically whispering in the ears of children, you know what mommy and daddy won't let you be? You know what mommy and daddy won't let you talk about? You know what mommy and daddy won't let you see in terms of sex? We'll show you. It's all you need for these New Jersey schools is yell the inside of a white van. Make that the wallpaper, right? A windowless white van. Make it the wallpaper for all of these New Jersey school and California school classrooms, because what you're doing is just like grooming these kids. Getting them into the van. This is the government white van with no windows, the one that creeps around the neighborhood. Get the kids into the van and pay tens of thousands of dollars in property taxes to have your kids metaphorically molested this way.
All right, well, we're going to go to the college campus because why not? Crazies all the time. So we have a college newspaper where they had a headline that said, "Should white boys still be allowed to talk?" And spoiler, the one writing the op-ed, said, hell no. It's by Leda Fisher. She's a self-identified black girl at Dickinson College, which is in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. And her op-ed is whining about how white boys incessantly speak about issues and they share their opinions. Now, this was published in the student newspaper, the Dickinsonian. And, of course, the school administration says, free speech, so we're not going to take a position on this. But one of the lines that Fisher put out is that American society tells men, but especially white men, that their opinions have merit and that their voice is valuable. But after 4 years of listening to white boys in college, I'm not so convinced.
Who's telling this to these kids? Where is America telling these kids this? Because I can't find a single example of it. Where are Americans or representatives of America telling kids that, hey, you're white and you're male, your voice counts for more? I just don't see it. And don't give me this latent inherent racism in the culture. BS. You look at what our major corporations are into, they're into social justice. You look at what our politicians are into, they're into social justice. You look at what our schools are teaching at every level from pre-K to graduate school, it's social justice. You look what our entertainment community is into, it is social justice. This is a uneducated, really shallow student who's had her head filled with a lot of agitprop and propaganda, a lot of social justice nonsense. So now she is utterly incapable of realizing at age 19 that the racism she fights is the racism she projects. How about the hate you give, honey? How about the hate you give? You are too shallow to recognize rank racism and bigotry when you spew it. This is the kind of crap you get when we start taking young girls at the ages of 7, 8, 9, 10 and teaching them radical intersectionality.
And the sad truth is, she says after 4 years of listening to white boys in college, which means she should be a senior, which means she's probably going to be on the job market next year. Get ready for her as an employee.
Well, I mean, again, she's going to be hired for her social justice bona fides, not for anything she's accomplished. This is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez without the bartending experience. There's no difference here. But again, I want to remind you, the university says, right, we defend free speech. You always defend free speech when liberals, progressives, and minorities are saying hateful, racist, bigoted things. But again, if one of those white boys had said something like this about her, there would be no defense of free speech. There would be an investigation, there would be sanctions, there would be possibly suspensions, and possibly expulsions. So again, who has absolute right to speak in our universities? It ain't white boys. It ain't.
Well, and that's why I always say, if you read a headline like that, let's take a different perspective. So if the headline read, should black girls still be allowed to talk? Outrage would ensue. There's no way that article gets published without tons of hate, but because it's white boys, it's okay. We'll just put it out there and see what happens.
The assumption of the university is she's right. We would assume any white boy... Well, first of all, the student newspaper would never in 100 million years have published that if it were about a white boy talking about some other race. Or even, men talking about... Never would have got published. But the university... The student editors of those newspapers know that you can't push the envelope too far left, because what's the worst that's going to happen to you? They're going to slap you on the wrist and say, now, we support free speech, wink, wink, but you probably ought not have said that. And so what I'm worried about is what you're teaching these young people, particularly these minority people. You're teaching them that this fuzzy fog of hate and racism that you really can't see clearly, that there is no real societal structural evidence for, that is so pervasive that your reactions to them has to be to hate the people back. It's a very slippery slope and a dangerous game. It is a absolute fuel for, if not armed conflict down the road, then serious, serious sociological discord.
And we're not done. The very same day that Fisher's op-ed was published in her student newspaper, we have the Yale student newspaper, which published an article called Evil is Banal. So it's an op-ed in Yale University's student newspaper, which is the Yale Daily News, and it suggests that students collect and store evidence on white male classmates so that in the future you can ruin their political careers. Now, this is written by Isis Davis Marks, and she says, I'm watching you, white boy. The lead actually says, everyone knows a white boy with shiny brown hair and a saccharine smile that conceals his great ambitions.
And so you see what I just said come to fruition here. We've got another one of these stories coming next, ladies and gentlemen. This is a package deal to show you just how far along this hatred has proceeded. A creamy-faced white boy with saccharine smile and brown hair. I mean, this is worse than just racial scapegoating. This is worse than just general bigotry and bias. This is a kind of stalking. We're going to stalk you, basically, right? We know that sooner or later you're going to say something that we, who have the power in universities, we dark-skinned people, we're going to wait and wait and wait until you say something that we can prosecute you or oust you from your classes or get you fired or from a career down the road. We're going to be paying attention because we know that even as they're being racist and sexist in their assumptions, we know that sooner or later you will make a sexist statement kind of like the ones we're making, and we're not going to get held accountable for it, but you will. And how far are we away from the fact? We've already seen it with Kavanaugh, right? Where you can actually make up claims with no evidence, and half the country, half our politicians, 95% of our celebrities immediately agree. How about Jesse? How about Jussie Smollett, right? Who now we found out that black gay Jesse made it all up. You're telling the truth, Katie, that there aren't a lot of MAGA hat wearing dudes who have nooses in their pockets and little bottles of bleach in their other pocket, wandering the frozen cold streets of inner city Chicago at 4 in the morning. You're telling me there's not a lot of those? Yet how many of our news people, whose job it is to differentiate between fact and fiction, drop that story as well? And now you see what you're breeding here with ISIS and Lita, right? Besides a really bad episode of The Avengers, you're breeding a really, really hateful, toxic brew culturally.
And it goes deeper than that, because if you think about this is 2 student newspapers. Now, I worked at a couple student newspapers, and I was the editor-in-chief of one of them. This is what's coming out of how they're teaching the journalists to be on top of it. So you wonder why you get, Jim, look at me, Acosta all the time, where everything has an agenda for these journalists. Yes, this is op-ed, so yes, you can put your opinion, obviously, in that section. But we see time and time again, every week we have these stories where all it is this hate just spewing out.
Love that point. Where is the filter? Where is the filter for these journalist schools? These kids who are in charge of these papers. I mean, it's even more dangerous, I think, than growing up kids like Lita and ISIS. The fact that there is no journalistic faculty member or editor at the top who would filter this. And these kids have been so poorly trained to be our future journalists that they see nothing wrong with publishing op-eds as this. That's the real problem. You mentioned Acosta, right? He would have fit in right in with this. Even though he's the banal face of evil. He's that smarmy brown-haired dude, right? With the insincere smile. Acosta would have published that about himself, no questions asked.
I feel like we should take a look on his Twitter. He probably shared this article.
Well, that's why the first part of Twitter is twit.
That is very true. Now, I want to encourage everyone, just very quickly, that at the end of ISIS's article, she says, "I can't let things slip by. I'm watching you, white boy, and this time I'm taking the screenshot," meaning she's going to screenshot what. I just encourage everyone, go find ISIS's article and screenshot it, so later, when she wants a job,
and how soon will it be before, if you actually throw up ISIS's screenshot to somebody 10, 15, 20 years ago, they will call you racist for bringing it
absolutely.
up, right? So you're racist if you do, and you're racist if you don't. The one thing we do know is you can't be racist if you're leading ISIS. That's what these kids take away from school.
All right, well, let's go to an interview with a woman who has a brain, Elizabeth Johnston, the activist mommy. She has a brand new book out, and it's called Not on My Watch, How to Win the Fight for Family, Faith, and Freedom.
Our guest this week is a speaker, vlogger, and mother of 10 children, and the author of a brand new book entitled Not on My Watch, How to Win the Fight for Family, Faith, and Freedom. Elizabeth Johnston, the activist mommy, welcome back.
Thank you. It's so good to be with you.
Glad to see you again. Your Activist Mommy website and social media accounts have been dedicated to fighting for religious liberty, pro-life issues, and the morality of our nation's children. Tell us about this new book, Not on My Watch, and the motivation behind it.
Yeah, I really believe that Not on My Watch is going to inspire a lot of everyday Americans to get off of the sidelines and get on the front lines of the battle. There's a lot of inspiring stories in Not on My Watch and a lot of scriptural analogies, and I really believe that the public is going to enjoy this.
We're looking forward to reading it. And I know that, again, the abortion work, the anti-abortion work that you're doing is so critical. Could you talk a little bit about the upcoming day of mourning, how it relates to the book, and what people can do to participate in this very important pro-life cause?
Absolutely. Ever since the New York infanticide law was signed by Cuomo, and not just signed, but celebrated by lighting up the World Trade Center pink, my inboxes have been absolutely slammed with desperate messages from Americans who are saying, I am done with being on the sidelines. I have got to get on the front lines and do something as a good Samaritan to save the lives of these children, these precious little innocent boys and girls that are made in the image of God. What can I do, Elizabeth? When are you going to New York? They basically left me with no option. And we organized the day of mourning. We are calling this entire nation to repent with us, to mourn with us over the 46 years of bloodshed through abortion. We are asking everyone to wear black, to not shop, to print out the sign on our website and put it on the front door of your business and shut down your business on February 23rd, Saturday, and to gather either in homes or in churches and pray and repent for the sin of abortion. And we've also got an amazing rally planned in Albany, New York, right at the epicenter of where the New York law was signed. I can tell you more about that too. We're super excited about it.
Fantastic. Tell us a little bit about the chapter in your book, your upcoming book on abortion. What can moms and dads expect to see if they read that chapter? What advice do you have?
Well, I really give a lot of personal stories about babies who we have been blessed to be able to be used by God to rescue from abortion. That's really how the chapter starts. And I really believe that it will inspire people again to realize that you don't have to be a politician to make a difference. You know, you don't have to be a doctor or a lawyer or political strategist. That just as an everyday citizen, there are so many things in the culture war that we can do to make a massive difference. As one homeschooling mom, you know, I've been able to deal a massive blow to Teen Vogue magazine to the point that 5 months later, they shuttered their print edition. We've shut down sex brothels, started a global movement against pornographic sex education. And again, I have a following, but I didn't when I started. And I was carrying a diaper bag around with my 10 children, homeschooling them every day. And so social media has given us an ability to affect culture in a powerful way. We just have got to really repent of our apathy and our silence and our fear of man. Shake all of that off and engage our culture and see what God can do for you.
We've talked a little bit about the pro-life nature of the book. Can you give a potential reader out there a little more? What other issues are they going to find highlighted in your book, and how to activistly, as an activist, take them on? What other issues are at the forefront of what you're writing?
Yeah, obviously I have to deal a lot with the gender situation, the transgender situation, with biblical marriage as opposed to homosexual marriage, so many things. I talk about public schooling and homeschooling. I'm a homeschool mother and a huge homeschool advocate, so I talk about that in the book. But for the millions of parents who aren't choosing to homeschool, I also have a whole section of the book of practical suggestions of how to keep your children safe from the radical agenda of the public schools. So I think people will find that it's not just inspiring, the book, but that it's also practical.
Having written a book myself, not quite as really intimate a book as you've written, but being an author always reveals things to yourself about yourself. In the process of writing this book and all your experiences, taking you from basically nowhere to in the major spotlight in these fights, what'd you learn about yourself? What'd you learn about your faith?
I think I learned about myself that I really don't like finding time to pull away from my children. That was the hardest part for me about writing the book, was I do not enjoy being away from my children, and I had to have some chunks of time, obviously, where I was focused on the book. But I really am proud of this book. When I have had to edit it and reread it, I was like, wow, you know, I can't believe I wrote this. Yeah, I really think that God will be able to use this to bless people. And again, it's very easy to read. I've been told by others that it's super easy to read and fun to read, and I make you laugh a little bit and also make you angry a few times. So
We'll talk a little bit about where can people get this book. What would be the best way to get their hands on it?
Yeah, it's basically everywhere books are sold. It's on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Target, which I boycott. Funny enough. The decision my publisher made, I guess, not me. ChristianBook.com, I noticed, had I think the least expensive version of it. So for those who want to support a Christian business, ChristianBook.com would be an excellent option. I did read the audiobook as well. So you can get the audio version downloaded so you can listen to it when you're driving or doing other activities.
Elizabeth Johnston, also known as the Activist Mommy. It's always a great pleasure to speak with you, and thanks for standing up for moms and dads across the country.
Oh, thank you so much. I love the work that you do with Freedom Project. God bless you guys.
Talk to you soon.
All right, for the final segment today, we have another top 10 list.
This is a good one. This is FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Education, a remarkable organization of bipartisan people. It is not liberal. It is not conservative. These are bipartisan academics and scholars and freethinkers who keep close tabs on how free speech is being under assault in colleges and universities. Every January, they publish their top 10 worst public universities, public or private universities, actually, in terms of free speech rights. And keep in mind, as FIRE reminds us, that public colleges and universities are bound by the First Amendment. They must. Public schools, public universities, they must honor free speech rights. Private colleges on this list are not technically required by the Constitution to respect student and faculty speech rights, but the irony is all of them promise to do so. They all boast about how open they are to free speech. So the top 10 list, I know Mike's going to show you where to find it, give you a list there, but I only focus on 3 of them, right? Syracuse University in New York is one of a number, they've been on this list a number of times. They suspended Theta Tau engineering fraternity students for a private satirical skit that they held on their own off-campus site, which was, they were roasting each other. Think of Michael Scott's roast, right? Yes, Michael Scott, where they're going back and forth in rather crude ways about themselves. Well, this was absolutely unremarked until weeks after it happened, when somebody leaked a film version of this to the student newspaper, right? And having no filter and no ability to judge, they immediately made this a big deal. Campus outrage ensued, and surprise, surprise, Syracuse University found that they violated in this roast many of their ubiquitous speech codes.
I mean, this is the same thing that happens all the time. I wonder how many events are out there where everything's fine, everyone had a good time, you went home, you think everything's done. And 2 weeks later, one person finds something offensive, and then it blows up and becomes this big thing.
To me, what these fraternity boys do in their own house is not surprising to me. The fact that some idiot leaked it doesn't surprise me. The fact that the student newspaper, without a single filter, decided to run with this as a piece of gotcha journalism. But Syracuse University, my God, you keep ending up on this list. At the University of La Crosse, which is one of the University of Madison system schools, right? The University of Wisconsin system schools. At UW La Crosse, Chancellor Joe Gao was punished for inviting sex educator Nina Hartley, and by sex educator, we mean really, really, really hardcore porn star. And what I like about this story is the consistency of FIRE. They're basically saying it may have been tacky. Gao may have tried to really hide this from people, but if it's sex week on a college, why is it impossible for a sex worker to speak there?
Yeah, well, and we reported on that story because there was other things about it. And we said at the time that, okay, she can come to the campus and she can speak. We thought the fact that he was paying separate money was a little bit.
Yeah, while I agree in theory with what FIRE is saying here, it's the shady way he did this, right? Where it was unclear where the funds came from, and then he once she was on campus, he didn't want her to get out, right?
Yeah, that was true.
They kind of went radio silent, so they didn't really advertise it that much. One gets the impression that Mr. Gao has been a longtime fan of Nina Hartley in perhaps ways we don't want to talk about.
True.
And finally, Liberty University. Again, I want to applaud FIRE for their broad-mindedness. This is a Christian university. And this is a private university that does not necessarily have to promote free speech rights, but President Jerry Falwell Jr. of Liberty in 2016 said, and I quote, "Liberty University promotes the free expression of ideas unlike many major universities where political correctness prevents conservative students from speaking out." Well said, Jerry. And then you turned around and censored your own student newspaper.
Absolutely, that's what he did. So the Liberty Champion is their student newspaper, and several times there have been articles by students that basically Liberty said, sorry, no, you can't run that.
It's funny how public school university campus papers, they're not terribly interested in the deceit or the nastiness of their universities. They're more interested in what the kids are doing. So we've trained journalism kids in public schools to go after everybody but the school. Where in the private schools, who are trying at least to guarantee free speech, it's a different game. So it does go to show you the stranglehold that progressives have on our kids' journalism schools across the country. One student, Jack Panyard at Liberty, actually wrote an article about unmarried pregnant students, which was cut before publication because it gave a black eye to this most visible Christian school.
And now we wrap things up with extra credit, where we laugh, we sigh, we weep for the future. And we begin knowing that last week was Valentine's Day, and while some were celebrating love, others raised money for baby murderers. The Pink Gala for Planned Parenthood took place at Cornell University for the first and hopefully last time. The event was organized by the class councils and advertised as benefiting an incredible cause, with all proceeds going to a local Planned Parenthood. So, happy Valentine's Day. Do they make candy hearts that say that?
First of all, Cornell University, did Here Comes Treble sing at this event?
But at least the students at Pace University seem to care enough about life to reject a complete BS reproductive justice course. Due to low enrollment, the university had to shut down the course called Job Opportunities in Sexuality Education and Reproductive Justice in the Nonprofit Sector. Yes, that's the full name of that course. The course's goal was to broaden students' knowledge on sexuality, abortion, contraception, and more, to make them competitive in the job market. The students served themselves justice by not enrolling.
Maybe what they should do next time is murdering babies for profit. I guarantee you every butts would be in all the seats there.
One course that is moving forward this spring involves Bond. James Bond. Unfortunately, it is being taught as a women and gender studies class at the University of Oklahoma and focuses on performance and intersectionality of gender, race, class, nationality, and sexual orientation in the films. It'll look at the Bondian elements and the problematic representation of women. Now, I don't drink, but I think this class would make me order a martini. Shaken, not stirred.
Money penny, send a dozen roses to Pussy Galore.
Speaking of women who need a drink, a woman has been hanging around the Towson University library trying to find her son a date. Yes, this 50-something-year-old woman has been showing cell phone photos of her son to get him dates. Now, it's unclear if she was seeking men, women, or something else. The cops want help in finding her, not for any criminal investigation, but probably because her son is paying them to make her stop.
I think this is shockingly entrepreneurial.
The woman at Towson could have benefited in her quest if students presented their pronoun identifications on their ID cards. Luckily, the students of the University of California, San Francisco can do just that. To feel safe navigating UCSF, students are encouraged to share their pronouns with stickers. So if you're feeling like a Z, grab a red sticker. And if you're feeling really frisky, grab the green sticker, forcing people to ask you about your pronouns. But you can always peel it away and change it whenever you want, unlike your actual gender, because there's only 2 of those.
Stickers, massage rooms, therapy puppies, and coloring books. $60,000 a year for your kids to be given those things out of their tuition to navigate the difficult world of a college campus.
And with that, make sure you head over to drdukeshow.com, subscribe to our podcast version, and listen to it on iTunes. Maybe give us that 5-star review.
And that does it for us this week on The Dr. Duke Show. If you like what you heard, please share the podcast with your friends and your family. For Freedom Project, I am Dr. Duke. She's Katie, and we'll see you next time.